Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Every contact leaves a trace. That's not just a principle for forensic science, it's also a profound truth about leadership, about life, and about the influence we carry every day, often without even realizing it. In today's episode, I sit down with Paul Kinkaid, former senior British Army officer, global speaker, best-selling author, and executive leadership coach. And together we explore what he calls forensic leadership. Paul brings an entire lifetime of experience leading elite teams in the most challenging environments across 44 countries. And now he's working with high-performance leaders and teams who know they're doing well, but believe they can do better. What if the legacy of your leadership isn't found in KPIs or formal appraisals, but in the invisible marks you leave on people around you every day? What if, in every situation, every conversation, every meeting or moment of silence, you were leaving red traces or green ones? In our conversation today, we unpack the deep and often unspoken layers of leadership, the emotional intelligence, the interpersonal ripples, and the quiet power of storytelling. We talk about how trust, self-reflection, delegation, and care aren't soft skills, they're essential ones. We challenge the culture of promoting technical competence over enabling potential. And we ask hard questions about the damage toxic leadership can do, even when it hides behind high performance. You'll hear a lot of reflections on military leadership, the danger of multitasking in high-stakes environments, and the way our relationships at home can unknowingly shape our leadership style at work. Paul reminds us that leadership isn't about heroics, it's about consistency. It's about the seeds we plant and the people we lift, and the traces we leave behind. So as you listen today, I invite you to ask yourself, are you leading with intention or simply reacting? Are you leaving behind green traces or red ones? And more importantly, would you follow you? This is a conversation that may not give you all the answers, but it will challenge you to ask better questions. I'll see you on the other side. The aspect of forensic leadership. Can you help us get into understanding what inspired this kind of analogy and how it changes the way we should be thinking about leadership?
Yeah, sure. I was first introduced in sort of early 2000s. I can't remember the exact date, but it was a Royal Military Police Special Investigations Branch bloke who talked about the low card exchange principle and the fact that in forensic science every contact leaves a trace. And it just makes sense, doesn't it, that you pick that up and drop it down. You know, we're leaving a trace on the environment where we sit, we're leaving DNA behind, we're leaving fingerprints, footprints, fibres from our clothing. If you drop that into the leadership domain or even the broader relationship domain, that we leave traces even if we do nothing in that interaction with one another, we have by default left a trace. And so, you know, it's possible to measure these traces, it's possible to label them, and we'll probably talk about that. But yeah, you drop that into the leadership domain and it remains constant. Every contact leaves a trace. Some of those are good, some of those are bad. And we label people in our minds as to what type of leader they are, depending on what interaction we have and what I simplistically call those traces.
It was... I'll be totally transparent. I went and had a look. It was Dr. Edmund Locard, wasn't it?
That's right.
So
yeah.
It was the French Sherlock Holmes, or the Sherlock Holmes of France. Sorry.
Correct.
What a fascinating bloke.
Great
aspect
guy.
of criminology and toxicology and how I think of it with. I always used to use the analogy of scales. Like there's no innocent interactions. Every interaction. I think this hit me most, and it sounds horrible about people, but in dog training. So like puppy training my dogs. There's no innocent interaction. Everything I'm doing is either reinforcing one behavior or I'm adding something to one side of the scales.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? I think about that with my children as well. And we really should think about that, shouldn't we, when we think about the interactions that we have with people.
But don't you? People just don't think about those interactions enough. They just don't think about it. So part of what I talk about is being conscious, deliberate and intentional in the manner in which we lead. If we slow down, we'll actually get more done and we'll lead in a much, much better way as well and leave more green traces.
Yeah, I think I've only really learnt it. Well, so you learnt it through this forensic thing. I feel like half the time our superpowers live quite close to our scars. And I think I only really learnt about the damage that we do when a few relationships broke down, or when I went through recovery and a few things like this. And now I do this thing sometimes with my partner where we're together and you say, like, what would 9 out of 10 attention look like? Like if I was giving, because when you said, I don't think people really think about it, that makes me, reminds me of how vacant we are and we're not where our feet are when we're interacting with people. You say hi down there in the corridor, you walk into the meeting, do a cut round the table. Are you listening just to be polite, or are you listening to respond? Do you know what I mean? Because even those non-verbal elements, are leaving these traces, aren't they?
They are, yeah. I spoke to an ex-police officer this week, and she was talking about the fact that, we do. Our amygdala, the limbic part of our brain, is picking up on thousands of traces every second. We may not even be conscious of what we're picking up on, but sometimes, don't you? You go on a course or something, or you go into a meeting and there's someone in there you could never possibly have met ever in your life, and yet you feel you recognise them because you're picking up that you've got aligned values. And how that happens, don't know, mirror neurons and all sorts of stuff that are going on in the brain. But it's just
mirror neurons,
magic
things you see them say and do. And Simon Sinek gives some good impressions of it when he speaks about, you see someone that's also wearing a Yankees hat, or what is a Harley David symbol. It's a thing that we recognize that says someone stands for this thing. And did you ever read the book Bounce, Matthew Syed?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Great book. When you said about those micro movements and how much we're giving away, like I remember them looking at reactions of I think they took the fastest ping pong player, because as Matthew Syed was a ping pong player, wasn't he? And they took the fastest ping pong player and said, which sport has the fastest reactions? And they put them on tennis court, and they got some Olympian to like serve at them. And it just obviously sailed straight past. The person didn't even move their feet. And then when they recorded two professionals serving against each other, and they did the whole eye tracking, super slow-mo cameras and all that sort of stuff, the person wasn't even looking at the ball. You know what I mean? They were looking at their hips, their knees, their shoulders. They'd already started to instinctively move from all of those micro movements, isn't it? And I think if we're going to be serious about, building rapport with people, about making people feel seen and heard, and trying to build authentic connections with our teams, we really do need to think of this as a study, as a study of leadership, as a study of ourselves.
It is, yeah. I mean, in broad terms, that's anthropology, isn't it? The study of human beings and how we've evolved and stuff. But yeah, absolutely. We should look very carefully at what's happening in the room, the micro behaviours. We should pay very much closer attention to ourselves, but still be present, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. You had, people have heard this in the introduction anyway, but you've had quite an illustrious, widespread career. Predominantly, you spent a lot of time with the British Army, elite teams, 44 different countries, 5 continents. I'm interested what the military's or what the British Army's approach to leadership, because we espouse it. Me, as someone that knows nothing about it, we talk about it with very high regard. And I was actually just over in the Netherlands recently, and they were saying they send their officers on like an 8-week training course and things like this. Like, talk to me about what leadership development looks like in the British Army.
Well, it's perpetual. As an officer, you basically have just short of a year long at Sandhurst, but you're constantly training. You're training everybody for leadership, because weirdly in the army they spend probably 95% of their time training to do what they then do in the 5%, rather than 95% doing and only 5% training. So there is that
just perhaps slightly where we are.
Yeah, imbalance to start with. But on the whole, leadership training is good because it's deeply embedded in everything. It's values based as well, and there are known values of the British Army. Most organisations have values. The British military, all branches of the military, have this thing called the service test, and if you're seen to be failing the values and bringing the military into disrepute, you can be disciplined for breach of values and standards, which takes those values to a new level that most organisations don't have. But to go back to the question, if you like, then, there are great leaders in the military. There are great leaders everywhere, and there are great less than great leaders in the military as well. I won't name any for obvious reasons.
When you've had a bad leader, and again, we're not going to name any names, could you give some examples of the red traces that you, looking on reflection now?
Yeah.
What were some of the things you saw from bad leaders that you couldn't put your finger on at the time, but perhaps you just felt, I feel myself growing away from you every time you do that?
Yeah, giving out petty tasks that would probably be done anyway in the natural scheme of things, but making it a formalised task that requires an inspection at the end. Like painting vehicle registration numbers on the vehicle drip tray and inspecting it last thing on a Friday, rather than knocking off a bit early. People who say one thing but do another, so shouting at people for not passing a fitness assessment but never rocking up for their own one. That's a horrible level. Well, it happens a lot. So little things like that, all the way up to really, really horrible, what I would call deep red negative traces. It happens in every organisation. I'm not suggesting the military is unique in this matter, but it has its share of toxicity as well. People who are prepared to tread all over and do whatever it takes to get themselves forward. And I call that, status, ego, and power. When someone is doing something for any one or any combination of those three things, they've stopped leading.
You to flip the script onto green traces. You speak in the book about how red traces often stick with us longer than mostly be due to our survival instincts and how they relate to that feeling of threat. How can leaders sort of consciously create these green traces? Because you also speak about this green mindset, like a self-check. Yeah. I'd love to delve into that, because I feel like I've attempted different versions of that, whether it's priming in the morning, whether it's gratitude, whether it's, talk to us about the short-lasting effect of these green traces and how we can maybe stack the deck on them, and this sort of self-check you speak about with the mindset.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Godiva Limited. Godiva is one of the world's leading providers of specialist equipment for emergency services market. Godiva produces a comprehensive range of fire pumps, including vehicle-mounted, portable, and their cutting-edge integrated total water flow control system, SAMFlows. I've been using Godiva my entire career as a reliable pump on the fire ground. It is such a crucial element of a successful firefighting team that you want to empower your crews with the very best, reliable, quality product. Reach out to our partners by checking the notes in the podcast. Now back to the show.
There's a lot of science behind why the reds are more strong, which, we spoke before we started recording about mirror neurons, emotional contagion and all that. And so negative emotions move quicker and ripple quicker across a community than a positive one does because of that threat instinct. So therefore, if we flip it, as the question was, we need to work much harder to create the conditions for a green one to stick, which means we've got to do those more often. So you mentioned a word which is fantastic in your question a moment about priming. And a lot of that is, okay, which version of me has just got out of bed this morning? Which version of me is brushing my teeth? Okay, I haven't had the best night. I might need to tell people when I get into work that I've seen every hour of the clock, because that happens every now and again. I just tell them that I'm likely to be a little bit clumsy. Or just be consciously aware of which version of you is going into that meeting. And if you're more consciously aware, and I'll say the phrase again, more conscious, deliberate and intentional about the manner in which you conduct yourself, then you're more likely to be green in that meeting. And we're always in
you're
such
managing
a
that
rush.
person's expectations as well.
Yeah,
Me and my partner do this percentage thing. We always say, like, we need 100% in the relationship, which sounds silly, but like not 100% from each of us. We need 100%. So if she's had a rough day, she'll say to me like, babe, I've got 20%. Okay. So I need to step in now. I need to step forward. Or if I said to her, like, I've got 30%, okay, then let's give each other lots of elbow room, because the way that we speak, the things we remember or don't remember, probably not. Have you heard of Hanlon's razor?
I have, yes.
Yeah. So don't attribute to malice what could easily be attributed to stupidity or, forgetfulness or just simple, not aware. Like how many times do you see your partner? I see my partner do something, but if I know she's got 30%, she had a rough day, she's a teacher. So the cognitive load of teaching and learning is massive. My sister does it as well. And like you say, sorry to interrupt, but it's like having that analogy with work, isn't it? I mean, it's not coming in every day and saying, I've got 10%. You probably can't do that every day.
Not if you're in a formalised leadership appointment and you're being remunerated for that as well. Sorry, troops, I can't do it today.
You're going to struggle to swing that one for longer than a day or two.
There's no adulting to be done today.
But so sorry, I interrupted you around that green mental state. So that self-awareness is a big aspect of it.
It is, but it's also doing the small things. In the book, I talk about 3 guiding principles: care, notice, and transparency. And I truly think that great leadership comes from a position of care. But if you can demonstrate that care through noticing and just the ability to say thank you, but give evidence as to why you're saying thank you, it's so important. There's a guy out there called Ken Blanchard, and he says this beautiful thing. He's a big name in leadership and management, but he says, let's catch people doing something right. Because we so many people, who did this? Why is that there? There's a piece of litter on the floor. Why are you dressed like that? Why is your uniform like this? Why did you treat your colleagues like that? Why did you use the old email template? Why is your signature block not? All those little things up to big things as well, to be fair. But actually, if you walked around and said, who's put the new values of the organisation on the wall? Who's sent the email asking about, I don't know, Christmas party and things like that in July? Great call. Yeah. Thanks for doing that, and thanks for taking off. Those little things, catching some people doing something right, even if it is in their job spec and they're just doing their job, just say thank you for just doing your job.
Yeah, I often think about that. Like I hope to catch myself or my team in the act of greatness. I always try and say, like, catch them in the act of greatness, because it's a bit like the flow state, isn't it? You'll see sort of moments where, even if it's around a watch table, around a meeting, and the way someone just like a chameleon just flexes their style. Yeah. I see it with one of my crew managers. They're just the way. And this bloke, lovely lad, is a bit overweight, which is absolutely fine, but he uses that to his, I think, because I've said it to him before, we always laugh and joke. We're like, dude, fitness test coming up, blah, 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 you got to lose some weight. And he's like, no, it's a secret weapon. And he always just a little joke about this, because he's so good at the job that he's good enough to be respected by everybody, but also he's got such a softness about him. I don't think it's conscious, when you talk about like conscious and consciousness and all that sort of stuff, but I don't know where he developed it from either. I've had conversations with him about his family and about his parents and all this sort of stuff. He's got kids as well. I don't know where he's got it from, but any situation, and he can point stuff out when stuff is falling below standards as well, in such a non-aggressive, non-intimidating, non-accusatory manner. But again, he has that beautiful soft skill you just alluded to there, where he is. I think if it were podcasting, where like when I'm speaking to somebody, paraphrase back what they've said, and actually be listening to respond. And he does exactly what you just said. He gets so specific about the things that people were doing, whether it's, we were setting up for training this morning, mate, really appreciate you doing this, doing that. I recognized, the kit wasn't out ready for training or whatever it might be, or someone that's come in early to get the meeting room set up for the project, stuff like this. This stuff isn't just happening around us. No. Someone is really putting in those little bits of effort. And you could be that person where you're just like, well, that's what I expect them to do. Yeah, okay. But if people keep dropping good faith pennies down the well and they don't hear any splashback, they're going to stop dropping pennies.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to fill the bucket before you can take from it. There's no shoe pixies. I'm sorry to shatter people's illusions, but people don't come and fix the shoes in the night time. That is the cobbler's job. It's discretionary effort,
the funny advert that they have with that table in the lounge. Have you seen that advert on TV? Oh, God. So this woman disappears, there's a guy and a girl, and the woman is moaning at him about this table. She says, all this stuff, the house is a tip, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, babe, look, I didn't want to tell you this because I didn't want to ruin it and I didn't want it to, but she rings on the lounge. She says, this table is a magic table. He says, anything you put on this table, you wake up in the morning and it's gone. And she wakes up in the morning and she's left. And then at the final part of the advert, short advert, the 2 police officers around, male, female. And the owner, standing there and he's like, that she fell on the table, I think. You know, I got up in the morning and she was just gone. And the woman's looking at him going, "Are you serious?" And the male officer goes, "No, he's right. I've got one of these tables."
That's just...
But people are doing that, aren't they? And just like that, people will lead. I always say people don't lead bad organizations, they lead bad leaders.
Yeah, that's a truism. Yeah, massively true. But it's all about generating discretionary effort. Expectation leads to disappointment 9 times out of 10. So if you expect it to happen rather than notice it and say, "Do you know what? Thanks very much for doing that," people would keep doing it because they don't do it for the thanks, but when it comes, they continue to do it and they continue to offer discretionary effort.
Yeah. What gets recognised and rewarded gets repeated, doesn't it?
Exactly that. But you've got to recognise. In fact, when I was in the process of writing the book, noticing was originally called recognition. But you've also got to notice the bad. So recognition is a subset of noticing. So I changed it as I was writing the book, as that realisation came to me around, no, recognition isn't enough. It's good and it's important, but if we're going to be great leaders, we've got to notice things that aren't going quite right and step in from a position of care, explain what we've noticed, and help people.
I think that word forensic as well, for me, it kind of envelops the aspect of know thyself as well. Well, I think it's a banging title. I think it's really, really
Thank
strong.
you.
Before we move on, I wanted to say to people, the 1 Minute Manager, Ken Blanchard, if you don't know who that is, he was one of his original books, The 1 Minute Manager.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's an old book now. It's not really It's not a very old one, though. He was famous for the situational leadership, wasn't he?
And the original one, yeah.
Original one. So what gave you, I mean, you said, obviously, your reflections on your time in the military gave you the sort of drive to write this, but thinking about this stuff and actually doing something about it, there's quite a big cognitive chasm to cross there.
Yeah.
You know, what made you, because you've been doing quite a lot of work with fire and rescue services as well now, how did you recognize there was a need for this, and what have you seen the common questions coming from leadership within the first responder sector that really shows there's a need for this?
That's a great question. So yeah, I made all army officers lead, but not all make leadership their job. So I decided to study leadership very soon after joining. I observed leaders from all different walks of life, thousands of leaders over my service, to identify actually what is it that makes people follow them. You know, and so this sort of thing started to develop, and it stayed on the back burner. And then when I stepped away and started my own business in leadership consultancy, forensic outcomes, that we just started seeing a need for it, that too many people are awake at 3 a.m., call it the 3 a.m. club, worried about the manner in which they're leading, imposter syndrome or self-doubt or self-promotion. They're not promoting quick enough because there's a what would you call it? Impatience to promote, I'm finding at the moment.
Massively, just from my sector, UK Fire and Rescue Service, enormous. Because also everybody's not leaving. There's a lot of people retiring.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to fill them shoes. But when I look at how we expedite leadership in quite an sort of constructed, sort of very architected way that we develop people, I always think we're too impatient to be intelligent. Like, so much of this information is out there. You've written a great book. We're flooded with information, but like starved of wisdom. Someone like yourself, and there's many others out there who have really lived this. But that's why it frustrates me so much when I see it's kind of the reason for the podcast, actually. People retire and they take it all with them, and we just hemorrhage experience and knowledge, and we're not great at structured mentoring. And again, I echo back to that structured leadership development that you do in the military hours. Yeah, I mean, first leader is you're leading yourself. You're an operational firefighter, it might be. But to go into those first steps of leadership, you're just doing a command assessment. You're not, and that's just command in an operational tip of the sword environment. And that's not where we do the damage. Probably same in the military. I mean, we obviously in the military, you might kill people, and obviously you don't get too many blue on blue. But in ours, as the reviews will show, we're doing a lot of the damage nowhere near the front line. You know, we're doing the damage on stations, in headquarters, in offices.
That's very, very similar to my experiences in the military. That operationally, you know, when you're off wherever you are overseas and you're doing the job, everyone's focused on doing that job, and there's less BS involved. There's less bureaucracy, and people are focused, and they're a little bit, ironically, a little bit more relaxed about things, even though the stakes are higher.
Because you know your job, I think.
Yeah. So people are focused and they do it, much like on a shout with FRS personnel. Everyone knows what role they've got. You know, they're either BA crew, BA controller, or, you know, incident commander, or whatever it is that they're doing. And I find it starts to fall apart when the language used. So incident command in UK FRS, I think is very, very good. People inside might think differently. I don't know, but I think
it's one of our good exports, to be honest, because a lot of people do it around the world. They use our models, so we're good at that bit.
So what I find falls apart, and I get a lot of anecdotal evidence of this, is when there's a monitoring officer at an incident, and then they do the debrief. They don't catch people doing things right, and they sort of leave a raft of red traces. Why didn't you do this? And there's good reason for pointing out the things that have gone wrong or not well or not right. But it's got to be balanced as well with what has gone well, in order that people don't just go away, oh God. There's a great book out there by a lady called Kim Scott called Radical Candor, which is demonstrate care and challenge directly. And that's what radical candor is all about. And it's really important that people focus in on that. And I think you're right. You know, the damage is done when we're not operationally focused, whatever that means for your organisation at the time. And the bureaucracy starts to come in. We spoke before we started recording about fake emergencies. And that is to say that everything is a priority. Therefore, the organisation has no priorities. And when you've got so many external governance structures and external regulatory bodies that come in and want things that are actually not that tangible, not that measurable, then I personally think you start running after the wrong things.
100%. I forget what it's called. It's a framework where it says when a behavior becomes a measurement, it ceases to be a good measure, if that makes sense. Like when you start looking specifically for that thing, it ceases to be a good metric. So an example would be, if we said we want to measure diversity in the fire and rescue service, very popular political beach ball to throw around. And we go, okay, so a good lag measure of diversity would be creative solutions to some of the ongoing challenges that we're facing. But if we stop short and use the lead measure of how many people that look a bit different, sound a bit different, different coloured skin, different body parts, we want that, of course, reflective of our community. But what we really want is diversity of thought as well, because what sits within that person, we assume, is they've had a different upbringing. They've got a different type of unseen privilege. They have a challenge that they've had to overcome by coming into it. And that uniqueness is actually the diversity that we're looking for. But if we make the measure how many whatevers, pick your minority, is in the fire service, and that's the metric we go after, it ceases to be a good metric, I believe, of certainly neurodiversity.
It's really important. You know, cognitive diversity is the most important. I would stand by that, is the most important diversity. My brother and I, our parents are still together. We were raised in the same place. We're 4 years apart. He joined the police force. I joined the army. But we think about things incredibly differently. Yeah, we are a diverse pairing, despite looking pretty similar, being raised in the same way. Our frame of reference is very different. Now, you bring people into that equation who do have a different background, a different gender, different ethnicity, left-handed, right-handed, tall, short, you know, whatever it might be, any of the protected characteristics as well. And of course, that organisation is going to be broader, deeper, richer, more beautiful as a result. But you're right. I've not heard it mentioned like that before, but that's pretty deep and pretty profound, actually, that when you start measuring the best behaviours, they cease being the best measurement.
Yeah, and we can say that with, like, if I said about interpersonal skills for leadership, if I said, well, I mean, you know, I suppose a good measure is when's the last time, because we might ask in a cultural review, we might ask Paul, and say, Paul, when's the last time your manager had one-to-one with you? Or, you know, what's the company? Gallup. Gallup, that do all the surveys, cultural surveys, they do surveys. Or, do you have a best friend at work? Is one of the ones they ask.
That's it. Yeah.
All those sorts of questions. If I said to you, well, how many one-to-one chats have you had with your line manager? Have you had a one-to-one chat in the last 6 months? That might be a good measure if somebody cares about you. But if the manager thought that was the measure, I could smash out 20, 50, 30-second conversation one-to-one in a day. What would the value of them be? And we see this sometimes with appraisals.
Sure.
We go, well, is this person being supported in their continual professional development? And go, yeah, did the appraisal. I didn't necessarily ask if you did the appraisal. I said, is this person being supported in their professional development? And you thought I said appraisal. It's a bit like buzzword bingo. It's like you say, you're not listening to respond. You're waiting for your turn to speak. You're just ready with the comeback and go, hey, gotcha. And you just say the buzzword. You just say the values on the wall. But, living, if you challenge someone, you say, well, what does authenticity look like? What does humility look like? What does integrity look like? These words are just buzzword bingo. They don't mean anything unless we force ourselves to have that sort of level of self-reflection, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of people ask me, what's the key trait of a leader? And it's will, for me. You've got to have the will to lead. Lots of people say vulnerability. Yep, very important. People say, courage, trust, integrity, all very important. But for a leader, you've got to want to lead in the first instance. So it's got to be the will to lead, as far as I'm concerned.
I would agree with that. And I'm as you're speaking, I'm trying to relate. I mean, I could relate it to the teams and stuff like that. First thing that came to mind was my daughter, actually, because I think and I'm not saying I'm a good parent at all, but hopefully she would say I am. I think the best parents are people that want to be good parents. And that's what I see in this, not that it's a parent-child relationship as such in the workplace, although you have an element of responsibility and care.
Sure. It's
like, do I want my daughter to feel safe, happy, like she's enjoying her life? Do you know what I mean? Because if I use that as my fuel source, then it's a very potent and it will burn for a very, very long time. It can withstand a lot of stuff. If I make my leadership metric vulnerability or respect, because respect, and it was one that we put on some of our values things. I'm like, well, if you demand respect, that's not really going to work. I mean, there's too many interpretations can be taken from that. But I say to people sometimes when I can't find the words, I say like, I want to talk to you about this thing. I don't know how to say it. I don't really know how to discuss it. And I feel like I'm just going to vomit into this conversation with a whole bunch of words. And I don't want to offend you with any of them, but I want us to stick in this messy middle and try and work through it together. Are you committed to working through this with me? Because I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this because, we're both different, both unique. I'm not just going to slap a template on you from my management book and try and jiu-jitsu my way through this with all of my leadership development. I want us to fumble through this together. That's the way I kind of think of it. But some people don't like thinking of leadership as an exploratory, imperfect thing. Because but
it's got to be.
Yeah, but when we connect the dots looking backwards and we talk about great leaders, Winston Churchill, wow, great leader. Terrible father, so his books read, and also not a very valued son by the sounds of things. If you read some of the letters from your dad, you know what I mean. And I think up until maybe 2 years or 3 years before the war, you could probably summarize his career as a colossal failure, and that's just one of many. Not examples.
A nice person, quite a cantankerous old sod, but that's exactly who we needed at that point.
Yes, that's the whole gardener in a war, warrior in a garden. Which one do we need at that time? I wanted to ask you, when you said about those leadership behaviors, the app.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. I sort of zoomed out for a second and thought about that and thought about, well, I would love to unfold that a little bit for me. Talk to me about what happened there.
It could seem like I'm undoing my own app, but in what we've just discussed and agreed there, that measuring things perhaps isn't the right way. Which is
no. Yeah, I measure stuff. I used to do it with my clients. Yeah, like your mood, your behavior, all this sort of stuff. But what were you looking at there?
It's called Dacto app, or dactylography being the science of taking fingerprints. So it all kind of links together.
Love it.
And it's a form of this forensic trace that we leave behind.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
And what it does is, when I was an officer in the army, I found it actually quite subjective, measuring other people's leadership capability from above. You know, I was commanding other officers who were leading soldiers and leading other officers, and I had to write an annual report. And that's quite difficult because you've only got really your own lived experience to measure what their leadership is like. And actually the most important people in any leadership relationship are the followers, are the led. So having looked at what was out on the market, and there's 360-degree appraisal, which I fundamentally disagree with, because the nature of the question is so bland to get an answer from everywhere around you, from your boss, from your peers, from your followers, your direct reports. It's not really meaningful, and they're only ever done once a year as well. So at best, your data is a month old. At worst, it's 11 months old. So Dacto app measures 25 leadership traits across 5 leadership domains, and it measures it purely from the bottom up through a series of questions asking for one question about one trait, and it measures it simplistically on a -5 to +5 scale with no 0, so it forces people to go green or red, because actually if a leader doesn't leave any trace, by default that's red, right? Because they're not actually leaving a positive trace. And we can measure this over time, and it's monthly. Organizations buy into Dacto app, and they get these measurements done monthly, and you can see very early on. So if someone's leadership capability across any of the 5 domains drops off the edge of a cliff, then you can step in very quickly from a position of care, having noticed their scores go down, and say, Paul, I've noticed your scores have gone down. Is everything okay? Because what we fail to realise often is 100% of our people have got something going on in their life 100% of the time. Yep. Sometimes that'll squeak into the workplace, and their capacity or conduct or capability will drop, potentially through no fault of their own. I'll share here, my youngest stepdaughter was diagnosed with leukemia just after her mum and I got together. And that obviously has a massive impact on things that happen in the workplace. So of course your leadership capacity and capability drops off because you're full. Emotionally, you're full with what's going on at home. She's fine now. We're beyond 3 years later. She's rung the bell. She's an absolute nutcase, and it's fantastic to have her around. But you never know what's going on in someone's life. Yes. And that score, rather than going, oh, your leadership's dropped off. What's wrong? You're awful leader. I've noticed, are you okay?
See it as a flag for support, yeah.
Absolutely. Lead into support. You've mentioned it a few times, people listen to respond and all that. I find a lot of people listen autobiographically, which is they listen to your story in order to trump yours. And it's that classic, I've just booked a holiday to Tenerife. Well, yeah, great. We've booked one to 11 and just
COVID-20.
We've all heard that joke and all that kind of stuff. But it's people listen in order to then turn the story and make it about them.
Yes, I've certainly been guilty of that a lot of the time.
I think we all are. I think we're all guilty of that to some extent or another. And it's not malicious. It may not be intentional. But if we slow down and listen exquisitely to one another, we'll find out a whole lot more through those micro behaviours, if nothing else.
Sorry to hear your family's had to go through that. I can't.
We're stronger as a result. You know, we did go through the ringer, and it was horrible.
Jesus. That's,
But, lots of people, they say, oh, how did you get through it? Well, we had no choice. At the time when you're in it, you have no choice. I think there's a phrase, I won't say the actual phrase, but, if you're in the sticky stuff, or if you're going through the sticky stuff, keep going.
Keep going. Yeah. The obstacle is the way is one of...
absolutely.
What's his name? Can't remember his name.
Really good Sun Tzu or something.
runs a podcast. I think it was a Stoic philosophy, yeah, but it's he wrote a book about it called The Obstacles. Anyway, Ryan Holiday, that was it. I wanted to talk about the unseen effect about leadership. You mentioned in the book that a director said that they'd realised a little bit too late that one toxic leader, as a reference, had caused the resignation of 3 employees, losing 37 years of experience. I wrote that down because, as sort of said before, people don't leave bad organisations, they leave bad leaders.
Yeah.
Unfold that a little bit for me. What did the compounding effect of these red traces, how did you reflect on that with that director?
I mean, that was a really interesting conversation, actually, and it was rewarding, but also quite sad when that individual made the realization that the cost of not seeing the red traces earlier had a significant cost on their business. 37 years experience and knowledge leaving the business from 3 people. That's massive, and it goes to your point earlier on about people are leaving with all that knowledge, and what do we do about knowledge management? We need to get better. Well,
we see it the longevity of first responders. I think like paramedics, I think it's 7 years. Even my partner, I said about teaching, I think it's something like 20% don't make it past year 1, 60% don't make it past year 5.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ,
it's big.
Yeah, so it's expensive as well to retrain these people.
It is. It really is.
It's not a sustainable business model.
So we should lead them better in order to retain them, right?
Yeah.
What happens is people have only got a certain level of capacity, and that's individual, obviously, to keep trying and keep pushing. And if someone keeps laying a red trace on you, eventually you start avoiding that person and trying to go around them. But if you can't avoid them or go around them, and that trace keeps hitting you, firstly, that trace risks becoming a ripple and spreading out across the organisation, and then that's dangerous because red ripples move much quicker and are much stronger than green ones. So that negativity will move like a rot through an organisation, but it does compound, and people reach saturation point eventually, even if they are long-serving, loyal people. You reach this point where you go, I'm not prepared to put up with this.
You can only
anymore.
kick a dog so many times, and even those loving animals will not keep coming back.
No, exactly.
They will go, this is not worth it. Those political, professional kicks, loose elbows, kissing up and kicking down is something I see. We forget which way the organisation should be inverted. Someone said to me ages ago, treat it like a tree. The senior leaders are the roots. They should get in the resources, the money and everything like that. And they feed it to the organisation, because you, Paul, out there on the front line, you're the one getting bashed by the leaves and the real sharp end of the stick by the public day in and day out. I'm here to feed you. I support you. I hold you and all that sort of stuff. But we often think of it like a pyramid, don't we? And we kick down.
Yeah, it's because they're drawn like pyramids as well, isn't it? And, you get these phrases like stuff rolls downhill and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I think it all too often in organisations, not just UK FRS and the military, but also in the private sector, everywhere where there are people and there's a hierarchy, at some point it seems that people at some point in that hierarchy forget what it was like to be at the bottom, or stop caring. Not all people. I'm not saying all people do that, because there are some fantastic, very, very senior leaders who progress through on their own merits. How do we sustain
that then? Because it is really, really difficult. It's like it's a bloody hot day today. When you're really, really hot, it's hard to remember what it's like to be cold, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have that recency bias. We can't remember what it was like to be there.
I mean, there's an element. This is going to sound awful, but this is part of why I put DACTO app together, so you can maintain a log of leadership capability, but also you can see leadership capability in the lower levels. So the succession plan promotes enablers rather than doers. And we want enablers at the higher levels. You want people
Say more on that.
Too often, we promote people purely on technical competence or longevity.
Absolutely.
Pete's been around for a long time. He should probably be promoted now. Or, Paul's a great programmer. Let's make him the chief programmer. Or Sophie is great at HR. Let's make her the chief HR officer. Why? Sophie's great at HR as a business partner, but she may not have leadership skills, may not want to lead, go back to that will to lead. But what we've got to do, therefore, is work out a structural way of remunerating technical competence without aligning it to leadership requirement and leadership capability. That's really difficult.
Especially in the public sector.
Yeah. Look, no one's going to get rich or famous. They might get infamous, but no one's going to get rich or famous in the public sector. And that's not why people join the public sector. They join because of a fundamental baseline agreement of values at the visceral level. That's why I joined the army. It's why most people join the public sector. But yeah, how do we promote people who are exceptional firefighters and deserve more money in order to retain them as well, because they've got increased responsibilities outside of the workplace, etc., etc. But if they're not going to be a station manager or station commander, depending on which fire and rescue service or brigade you're from, then how do you remunerate them?
That's what I was about to say, because I'm a watch manager, watch commander. I think I'm a better watch manager than I was a firefighter. Not because I was a terrible firefighter, but similar to the creation of the podcast, actually, I realized I'm more interested in people than I am in the job. I'm really interested in the job. I love it. But after a certain point, it's all similar-ish. It's been a different policy, different procedure, problem solving. I love the adrenaline part of it. But people, God, there's a surprise a day waiting for you with people. They are fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in the people. But I'm starting to realize, just to make this like a private coaching session for a second, when I realized I wanted to make a difference, inverted quotes, in the fire service, I thought, I've got to be a senior leader. I've got to work my way up to the chief fire officer thing. I don't think the day-to-day work that's involved in that particularly seems to fill up my bucket, nor do I have the egotistical assumption I would have the academic rigor or any, I don't know, to get to that level. But let's assume it was an open door. I don't think I'd enjoy it. So I've found a passion with the thing that we're doing right now, but if I didn't, I think I'd have left. So the impossible question, how do we recognize enablers versus just output? Because if I said, Paul, I want you desperately to turn your chair around, I could just shout at you constantly. And assuming you didn't have the ability to just log off, eventually you would do it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the metric would show that it got done.
Yeah, but it was just done to shut you up.
Done by me. Yeah. And you can get an outcome by manipulating things, and I could get my dog to eat its tea if I just starve it for long enough. Do you know what I mean? Versus getting the person to want to do it. Do you know what I mean? The sell versus the tell. What does a good enabler look like? How do we start to recognize them a bit more, assuming people don't utilize the app at the moment?
Well, it's the gentleman you spoke about earlier on, the people who just have this knack of getting people to do things. A good lead. One of my favourite definitions of leadership or descriptors of leadership is the ability to get people to go further than they would have gone themselves. And I love that because it implies that there's this relationship going on. But I'm cognizant. I'm going to end up waffling here. The question was, how do we get people to enable? I think there's a natural talent around enabling. I'm not saying people are born leaders, but people are naturally born with a preference to enable, or their early years set them up to do that. But we can definitely nurture it as well. It's not all nature. We can create this enabling atmospheric, but it's got to be top down. People have to see it from the top down. So the military, you asked a question about what do they do about leadership development. It's all around this concept of servant leadership, which is great and very powerful, and it plays to your tree model rather than the pyramid model. We are senior in order to serve the population upon which we lead, and we're only there because we've got followers, so we need to be grateful for that and respectful of them. But we also need to nurture them and coach and mentor them, and rather than step in and catch people doing something wrong, that's not the way to lead. Say, listen, that you're aware that's probably left a bit of a red trace. Let's explore how you could have done that differently. That's going to leave a green trace, which means people want to do it for you in the future, or do it for themselves in the future, rather than do it just to shut you up. But that takes time.
Yeah, I was in a course a few months ago. Someone did a great little exercise to. There's two things this person did. First one was about recognizing good practice versus recognizing error. So if I said, actually, this would be the first time I've ever done this. If you're listening, do this. Write down 7, 14, 21, 27, 35, 42, 49. If I said to you now, Paul, what's that?
What, to add it up?
What does it look like?
My immediate thing was it's a row of numbers, but it's not the 7 times table because you had 27 in the middle.
So you want to focus on the one I got wrong. Didn't I get 6 right, though?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Did not get 6 right.
Isn't it a really interesting exercise?
we write it on a board. It works better. It works better in person. And people go, you got that one wrong. And you go, oh, so you didn't want to say, here's the rest of the numbers I got right. I got that one in the middle wrong. Do you know what I mean? And that's the one that we're going to focus on. And we do it. I don't know why we do it. It's what you've reflected on this a lot. Why is it political high fives? Is there social acknowledgement there for it? Why do we do that? Why do we focus on the negative so much?
I think there's a huge element of social engineering here. I think it's hardwired in that, from especially post-war, a lot of our current senior leaders learned their leadership from post-war leaders. And that environment was very manufacturing, very automatic, you were grateful to be in a job forever, and you put a widget in a hole and someone told you to put a widget in a hole and you could only put it in one way or it was wrong. So it was a very right-wrong society. Now it's not quite that black and white, that yin and yang, that left and right, if I can say those phrases. It's not like that. But
it's not binary.
It probably historically goes back to a bit of threat response as well. But I believe that people are, whenever you see a leader on the TV, in Hollywood, politically, we could discuss that, whether they're actual leaders or not. Let's not do that. But you can do if you want.
Damn you.
But
we'll get there in a bit.
I think we are brought up to believe that leaders are the strong, all-knowing, omnipotent being, rather than being vulnerable and making mistakes. And therefore, when you get to that leadership position, that's wrong. And it's almost hardwired in. It's almost a subconscious reaction to do that because we've been brought up that way.
I think you're right. I think there is an evolutionary context to this, isn't there? Because I had this conversation the other day with that pessimist and optimist with somebody, and they said, like, we've evolved to be pessimists. Because if you went, hey, Paul, what's the rustle in the bushes? Do you reckon it's that little bunny we saw yesterday?
Yeah.
And they go, no, but it's a fucking saber-toothed tiger, mate.
Yeah.
And you go, don't be so negative.
Yeah.
Paul survives, I die.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? We look at the threat response. We look for what is wrong. We look for what could harm us. Yeah. And in today's age, if we transfer that into the professional landscape, we get rewarded for highlighting errors. And, this might cause a problem long time. If we extrapolate that down the project, this is going to cause a big issue long term. But
so we've saved money, haven't we, by identifying that error at the low level was done. But we also pick up on incongruence with human beings. There's this, picture, the picture isn't matching the lips here. This is out of sync. Yeah. So there's something not right. And therefore we delve in because we want to fix and we want to solve. And we think that's helpful.
How do we get away from rewarding experience, long service? Because there's something you spoke about there. You'll obviously, of course, you'll know it better than me. Isn't there like a 4-year cycle in the military you're supposed to promote every 4 years, 5 years, 3 years?
I don't think it's that formulaic, but it is okay. in general terms. At the soldier ranks, or other ranks, it's a horrible phrase. The junior ranks,
it is.
People tend to promote around about that sort of time frame. Promote, quite early if they're talented and get up there. I spent, I think, longer as a major than I did all the other ranks combined as in the officer ranks, and that's pretty normal. So I'm not sure it's that formulaic, but how do you promote longevity now? You can do it in a formulaic way. You can promote longevity in a formulaic way, and the army does that. It's time served over the score you've got in your annual appraisals. So the longer you've served, the lower the score needs to be to promote to the next rank, weirdly, which I think is fundamentally wrong, because you've been in rank for ages. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that route, but I think it's fundamentally wrong. Okay. But there are some people who are, really, really good at what they do, and probably should be in a couple of ranks above or a couple of appointments above. But it's about helping them recognise that. And that's the trick, is helping them recognise it and demonstrate that we're not promoting you for you. We're promoting you because of what you can do for those who would now follow you. Those who you lead, and you're going to be a great role model for them because of what you've done over all these years. Now, if someone actually says, I'd
love to see that tracked more. God, I'd love to see that.
It would be great, wouldn't it? But that would mean we don't track the other things, and the other things are so frightfully important, aren't they? All the dashboards we've got, not so much.
I think it's this is the thing, though, isn't it? It depends on if you stretch the time horizon, it's what's important over the short term and the long term, isn't it? You see, echo back to politics. We see that I've got to get a outcome in this quarter, in this 4-year cycle, in whatever, because they say true leadership is when you plant trees under which the shade will never sit.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's you're not gonna I'll probably step out on a limb here and look stupid, but I listened to someone the other day saying, we've solved the power issue. I said there's been nuclear submarines all around the world, surviving for 60 years on the same power source. Now, I'm not going to go into that because I don't know the science behind it and how we bury them and how we get rid of them. I don't know. But if you did do that, in theory, just hold the science and hang in with me on this analogy. If we did, it'd be really expensive for about, 5 or 6 years. Then it'd be free for 30 years or something like that. I don't know. But it would cost so much political capital, nuclear science aside, for whatever it might be, for someone to fix something that was a perennial, long-term, chronic issue. But if they're not going to see it in their cycle, they're less inclined to do it.
Of course they are. It's because it goes back to those 3 words we used earlier on: status, ego, and power. Most politicians are doing it for status and ego and or power. In my humble opinion, there are very few that I believe are doing it for the genuine good and long-term benefit of the country. You look at most politicians in the first world, right? And they win their seat by demonstrating red trace activity on their opponent.
Yeah, zinging each other. Yeah,
gotcha. Opponent. Yeah, exactly. They don't necessarily win their seat by demonstrating why they would be the better person in that job. They win their seat by demonstrating why the other one wouldn't be the better one.
Really rough and unfortunately true. There's loads of... I wanted to ask you about storytelling, because kind of the whole thing with the podcast, to be honest with you. Someone said to me ages ago, never give a point without telling a story. Never tell a story without giving a point. Why should leaders be storytellers? MSA are supporting us on today's podcast, and I chose to partner with them because I've been wearing this stuff for nearly 20 years, and they are the global leader in development, manufacture, and supply of incredible, safe products that really protect people, not just our communities out there, but also first responders, most importantly, all over the world. Get yourself over to MSA and have a look at it. The high-performance protective clothing for emergency services responders. They also partner with us on the UK Pink Firefighters. It's because we love them. The helmets with the reflective visor, the F1XF, absolutely epic helmet. And not forgetting how they improve firefighter safety through their connectivity in the connected firefighter platform. MSA are always pushing the envelope, and it's a real privilege to be able to continue to grow our partnership together. So whether it's your PPE, your bunker gear, your helmets, your SCBA, your thermal imaging, your Luna, or your portable gas detection, both of us know that this equipment needs to work. It needs to be high quality, reliable, and dependable in the moment. And that's why I use MSA, because they know what's at stake.
Well, at the human level, we think in pictures. And pictures are words; they're not numbers, right? So we need to tell a story to get people's minds involved and get them in. That's where the transparency comes from. If we paint a picture with the words that we use, that is compelling, people are much more likely to follow us, rather than by the end of the year we need to be turning over 1 million, and our response time needs to be under 6 minutes, and it needs to be this. So you go, okay, right, I get all of that, but those are the enabling factors for the jigsaw puzzle. You've got to tell the people what the jigsaw puzzle is in order that they can see what part they play in it. Right, I'm a corner piece, I'm an edge piece, I'm a piece of sky, I'm a piece of river, I'm a piece of the cow, or whatever it is. Crazy analogy, but if people can't understand what it is they're aiming for, they've got nothing to aim for.
Got it. I think the women in the fire service say you've got to see it to be it, and it makes me think of old Martin Luther King. You know, aside from the cheating on the wife thing, pretty interesting bloke, pretty great leader, pretty great speaker, and he didn't say, "I've got a 27-point PowerPoint action plan."
Exactly.
He said, "I've got a dream. I've got a vision."
Yeah.
And he was such a fantastic orator in the way that he was able to give you that vision. You had to say, I usually had this conversation with my dad. My dad was a builder for 40 years. And we'd go to a place and he'd be building a new house or something. He'd like, look at the house. And I'd be like, for fuck's sake, Dad, what are you on about now? And he'd be like, stand there. And that was when I got a clip around the ear. Stand there and look at the house. And he'd describe it to me. It's a bloody field.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And he'd walk around it with me. He could see it. You know, I wasn't drunk, but you've got to see this stuff, haven't you?
Yeah,
you've got to be able, and you've got to try and get other people to see it. You've got to point the way.
Yeah.
And help them. And it's how we learn, isn't it? That's how the Bible was written. The Bible was written in stories. You know, whether you believe them or not is irrelevant, but it was like, it's lived for a long time.
I was going to say, if it is a story,
it's not done badly as a book, has it?
Yeah. I wouldn't mind selling a few copies close to that one. But, you know, I've looked at tribal chiefs in jungles. I've looked at village elders in villages, you know, in the third world, second world, you know, even people in the first world. And the best leaders, guaranteed, are storytellers. They're the ones who, they give their narrative in such a compelling way that it is, well, there's 3 ingredients to it in my experience. The story is inspirational because people go, yeah, I want a piece of that. That's amazing. It's aspirational because we want reward for a stretch target. We don't get rewarded for getting out of bed. We get rewarded for running a 5K race, a 10K race, a marathon. You get a medal and a shiny blanket or whatever. But we get rewarded for stretch targets. And it's got to be transparent. So inspirational, aspirational, transparent. If someone can't see what part they play in that plan, they're not going to offer discretionary effort.
Yeah, 100%.
So they've got to see. I'll go back to the crazy analogy. You've got, in order to build the jigsaw, you've got to see the picture. You don't throw a jigsaw at someone and take the picture away and say, crack on.
Yeah,
you know,
and they're holding one piece, and they've got to know which is their piece. How do I fit in?
And people are less likely to finish the picture.
The guy sweeping the platform at NASA, isn't it? He sees his role in this thing. Without me, bugs on the spaceship, dead astronauts.
I put astronauts on the moon.
Game over. I put astronauts on the moon. You spoke in the book around one eye on the horizon, one eye on the detail. They obviously intentionally, no doubt, seem like quite a dichotomy. I think I struggle with the former. I think I'm very detail orientated, even though I'm usually late for stuff. And the whole ADHD brain, I'm good at like sorting lots of stuff out and all that sort of jazz. I tend to live a bit day to day. Fold that into more of a leadership context for us. What does that look like in practice?
It looks like anticipating problems a long way off. It looks like anticipating opportunities before anyone else does and being able to maximize those opportunities. There's a thing, the commando mindset it goes along the lines of be the first to understand, first to adapt, first to overcome. A good leader will be able to do that for their team. Look out on the horizon, anticipate where the problems are going to be and where they come up. And therefore you can aim off and mitigate against the problem before it even arises. You know, if you're canoeing.
Condoring.
If you're.
Stick your head up, have a look.
If you're canoeing up white water, all you've got time to do is go, and your head is back in it. And so many leaders are that canoeist. or that kayaker. I always get the two confused, whichever one it is.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, if you can get into a bit of calm water, be conscious, deliberate and intentional, then you've got time to look upriver. Because if you're in the white water, the first thing you know about the crocodile is when it's right there. And the only action you've got is to bash it on the nose.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're looking upriver from the calmer water, you can see there's crocodiles there and go, right, we're actually going to take the kayak, canoe, delete as applicable, out and portage around it, or we're going to throw some bait in and get rid of the problem. Or actually we can look and go, there's a tributary there that rejoins and it's really calm. That's an opportunity that we can maximise.
So how do we seesaw that potentially quite jarring mindset from, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. We need to be present and be where our feet are, have these one-to-one conversations, build rapport, be intentional in our relationships with people, but also keep my head above the parapet, zoom out, stand on the bank so the crocodiles don't eat my team. How have you seen that sort of pendulum of mindset managed best?
I think it's the level of detail. Lots of leaders go into minute detail and start to micromanage as a result.
Yes.
And it's understanding what level of detail do you need to know in order to do your job and brief upwards that the jobs that you are accountable and responsible for are being done. So that is delegating effectively, which also includes setting the preconditions for that job. Pete, I'm going to give you this, but I need you to come and tell me every Friday because I've got a briefing with the Gov on Monday and I'll need to know where we are. So you tell me on the Friday, I'll have a think about how I'm going to present that to the Gov on Monday, and therefore I've got an appropriate eye on the detail. And by setting the preconditions and sticking to them, that's really important. You stop the problem of micromanagement rearing its head. Because if I don't set the preconditions with you and I keep coming up to you, Pete, how are you getting on with this? Pete, how are you getting on with that? You start thinking, Paul doesn't trust me anymore. So your discretionary effort starts to erode. And you say, well, do you know what? I'll just wait until you tell me to do something now. And I'll do it. How do you want it done? I'll do it that way.
Yeah, I've seen that created a lot. Almost the timid leader, the person that's just the paralysis of analysis. You've just frozen them on the spot. They've lost all that sort of conviction, isn't it? Yeah, we need to, I suppose we need to point the way and then let them sort of find the route, if you know what I mean. Just because they're not doing it the way you would do it, because they're not doing it right now.
Yeah.
Or you told them what the goal and the outcome is. How they choose to get there, you got to leave that open to them. Just because they're not going to do it how you would normally do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's outlined in David Marquette's book, Turn the Ship Around, which outlines intent-based leadership, which comes from the military mission command, which is tell someone what needs to be done. They go off and do it. How they do it is up to them, as long as, the mission is met, because they're the expert in their field. As long as you know they've got the right tools, so they've got the right capability to do it, and you've given them the right resource allocation to get it done, then they should be able to go and do it. And that's why delegation should be done almost scientifically around what elements of the task do I need to delegate? Is the person trained well enough to do it, and have they got the right resource allocation? Delegation is so often seen as I don't want to do this, so I'm going to give it to someone else, which just sets them up for failure because they're not trained to do it. They don't have the resource allocation to do it. And a lot of that, actually, Pete, it rolls from very high up in organisations because there's too much detail from regulatory bodies required at all times. We've got too many dashboards in too many organisations. And it goes back to the point the wrong things are being measured.
Yeah, they say not everything worth measuring should be measured, and not everything worth measuring is measured.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefighters podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. But here's the honest truth. It takes a colossal amount of time and work to keep the podcast going. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. Now, by joining this, you'll not only support the future of the podcast, but also gain access to exclusive benefits. Now, if you've ever wanted to meet a member of the podcast, buy us a beer, buy us a coffee, and you think anything you've ever listened to on the podcast has been worth £3, That's basically what we're asking you for. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, incident debriefs, and so much more. A growing collection of valuable resources to help you learn and grow. Your support in whatever way, dropping it in the WhatsApp group, sharing it on the local newsletter, whatever it is, it's incredibly valuable and we really do support it. And we need it to make it a long-lasting resource, that legacy resource we always talk about for first responders, firefighters, and everybody everywhere who's ever been interested in joining the fire service. Now, if you're already supporting something, as many people do, it's totally cool. You can still access the podcast for free and you'll always be able to access all the new episodes for free. But we're asking for your help to make this sustainable. And we want to keep growing, we want to keep sharing the insights, and we want to keep showcasing the incredible work happening in our community and our sector. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes. I want to make it personal for a second. You've already brought your stepdaughter up, which I appreciate that bit of vulnerability. I'd like to invite you to point thumbs and less fingers, not that you're pointing fingers. Your son George said, "You're leaving red traces all over me, man."
Yeah, he did.
Talk to me about how we show up at home and how does that relate to how we show up at work? And
I said at the start, didn't I? You know, I call this, I choose to drop this into the leadership domain, but it's that we're talking about relationships, and of course that pervades everywhere, and it's especially strong at home. Mm-hmm. And that particular thing, we had a family barbecue going on, which sounds very grand. It wasn't. We're in the garden, and I started over-explaining something to George, who at the time was 17 or 18, I can't remember, but more than capable of making his own mind up about this thing, and he just came out with it. "Dad, you're leaving red traces all over me, man." At which case, everyone wet themselves laughing because my theory had just been slapped back well and truly and appropriately.
How did you take it?
I just started laughing. I went, "Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, owned it. You got to own it." So, yeah, it's really important. We're talking about relationships, and it's harder to do at home than at work, I think, because when someone has only got 20%, but they haven't communicated the fact they've got 20%, and they say something in a manner that we find inappropriate or clumsy, and it leaves a trace, we can react back because we've had to be the politician at work. I don't want to be the politician at home as well.
Yeah.
And actually, it should be the other way around. We shouldn't be the politician at home. Of course we shouldn't. But based on genuine care, which is where I believe great leadership comes from and great relationships, you should just, I think Stephen Covey wrote it in the 7 Habits, seek first to understand before being understood. And I managed to do this in a work relationship, but occasionally I mess it up massively at home. Someone will say something in a wrong way and I'll go, "Did you mean that to come out that way? Or would you like the opportunity to say it again? Or are you okay?"
Second one feels less dictator.
Yeah, exactly. There's a tone to the first one.
I always use the "help me understand." I always go for that.
I like that. It's very elegant, more elegant than mine.
Help me understand what's frustrating you, sweetheart. If I'm talking to my daughter or my missus, or I use it at work. I go, "Help me understand because this is what I thought you just said," and I like that's not really you.
So I use those phrases.
Understand.
I use those phrases in the workplace, but I should use a similar phrase at home rather than...
You don't want to be condescending though, do you? That's the thing. You don't want to come across as that corporate dick at home.
Because if someone's only got 20% or 30%, being condescending is going to reduce that even further. And you are the flint that lights the fire.
People don't want to feel like you're doing the management jiu-jitsu on them.
No.
Don't hit me with your emotional intelligence BS, Paul. I ain't in the mood for it.
Exactly. Right. We are both... highly qualified coaches at home. We never coach one another unless the person who wants it says, "I could do with a bit of coaching on this one."
Yeah. And then I think of that one. So me and my missus, we're not highly qualified coaches by any stretch of the imagination. She's probably better than me. Well, definitely. But we use the help, heard or hugged one.
Yeah.
Like you've got a thing that's annoying you. Okay. Firefighters, we want to fix problems. We want to help. Let me do it. Let me tell you what you need to do. There's a 2-step program. But we always say, like, do you want to be helped, heard, or hugged? What's going on here? Because sometimes I just want to.
I like that.
Talk. I just want to talk. I just want to be hugged. I don't need you to fix anything. I'm not asking you to fix anything. Or you say, the one where I want to be coached is, I need you to help me understand what I'm not seeing here, because my piss is boiling from this afternoon's engagement with the management.
Yeah.
Like I am just absolutely seething, and just like help me see something that I'm not seeing, help me get out of my own head, or challenge me on this belief. How could this be right? How could this be wrong?
Yeah.
Or whatever. What would I need to believe to think this way? Because the way
definitely.
Paul spoke to me today was so left field, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, it's a really elegant way of behaving, both in the workplace and out of the workplace as well. And I don't think there's time for that. Organizations have been cut back so much, both in the public and private sector, that there isn't time anymore because we've got so many things to do. The operational tempo is so great across almost all organizations now that we don't have time to review things. We don't have time to say, let's go for a walk around the car park.
Yeah.
Let's go and have a brew.
We don't make time.
No,
We do have it.
especially post-COVID, there's no respect for one another's calendars anymore, especially now we've got MS Teams all the time.
24/7. 24/7, baby.
Yeah, exactly. You could decompress and reflect between meetings if you were driving from location 1 to location 2 and your meeting was there. You had that 5 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. Now, with back-to-back meetings on Teams, on Zoom and what have you, there's
Walking
no
out
time to decompress.
still on the Teams meeting on your phone, putting it on the thing.
Yeah.
I'm just driving, guys, but I'm just going to switch the video off. I'm here, though. I'm listening.
And how dangerous
Jesus
is that?
Christ.
I mean, you know better than anyone what the effect of that could be, because if your brain is focusing on the meeting and processing that, there's elements of the road that it's not processing.
I worry about this most with station managers, just as a random rabbit hole. When they're on the way to an incident, they're under the veil of diligence. They're having conversations with fire control. They're trying to look something up on the iPad, so they've got a bit of information about the site they're going to, or they don't quite remember the procedure for this thing that they've been called to be a specialist on. So they should be focusing 100% on driving. And I'm not saying they're stupid. I'm not saying they're dangerous or whatever. Well, not consciously anyway. But the cognitive load there is enormous.
It is.
Enormous. There's a reason there's 4 of us on a fire. I mean, there's 4 of us on a fire engine for lots of reasons. But I'm not driving whilst I'm sat in the incident commander seat. I'm looking at stuff, talking to the people in the back. I'm looking at the map. I'm looking at the local hydrants. I'm checking the procedure. What am I supposed to do at this factory I'm turning up at? What sort of high-rise building is this? I can't remember what the special procedure for bloody horse rescue is. So I'm just having a look to make sure we get the right kit off and all, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we have an unrealistic appraisal of what because we always say like, oh, are you a good multitasker? The research has been done. You can't multitask. No, you can task switch, and some people can do it more effectively than others, but none of us can multitask. It's impossible. I wanted to, when I was thinking about that guy we spoke about earlier, that crew manager that I'm got a real man crush on, who's Chris Butt?
Chris Butt. Yeah, Chris Butt was a great mate of mine who was just a genuine... He was the guy you're talking about. Everyone would go to Chris. Chris was what's called a late entry officer, which means he joined as a soldier, progressed all the way through every single soldier rank, and was then commissioned as an officer, and made it through several tiers of officer rank as well. We were both commando trained, so we had an affinity there. And he was just one of these guys who was emotionally intelligent. He was childish at the right time, but very grown up at the right time. He got the measure. He was a social comedian. He could be chameleon, not comedian. Yeah. He could be what the situation required of him at the click of a finger. And actually, by the time you'd thought to click your fingers, he had already changed. He was that socially adept. He's such a great guy. I loved him to bits. And I have no shame in using the word love either. An absolutely incredible guy who so many people went to when they had a problem. So in the back of my book is a forensic manifesto, and in there it says that be the leader others need, not necessarily the one they want. He was the one they needed. And be the leader others turn to. people turn to Chris. In military terms, I was a higher rank than Chris. So people who don't understand the military way, why on earth would a major go to a captain? He was my friend.
A cultural architect as well, though.
He was an incredible guy. And as is so often the way, cancer came along and took, the best one. Took the best one of us.
I'm really sorry to hear of Chris. How old was he?
He was in his 40s. I think he was around 47, 48. I might be doing him a disservice by the time he died. Incredible guy. Unfortunate that he died died at all, of course, but during the COVID time. So he didn't get the sending off
he deserved.
That he probably deserved and should have had.
That the chameleon that you speak about in Chris, and again, I don't know Chris other than what you shared in the book. There was another woman I used to work with who actually left the fire service, and she was arguably even better at this chameleon element of it. And the question that's manifesting at the end of this is, I suppose what I said earlier about do your superpowers sit next to your scars, because she was that social chameleon. She was so aware of the mood in the room. And when I got to know her a little bit better, it came up in conversation that she was single. I was married at the time, so it wasn't that sort of conversation. But I said, interesting, cool, yeah. And she said, no, I tell you what, absolute shower of poo when trying to get rid of it. She was in a relationship of domestic violence, very severe domestic violence, for about 15 years. And the person ended up going to jail. And she said that's what she thinks developed it. Because she was so aware of her surroundings and the mood in the room, and how to manage it and how to dissipate it and how to, just pacify this person.
Yeah.
So I suppose the question I'm asking there is, hopefully Chris didn't go through something similar. How would someone develop a skill set like that? Because it seems I'd like to do a bit. Yeah. I feel like I'm pretty good at building rapport, but I'm not as good as that. I can be quite oblivious to the room sometimes. Because I
think it comes down to your level of emotional intelligence, and again, your willingness to want to be the person that others need. Mm-hmm. He had a huge amount of lived experience. He'd been in the army since 16 years old, travelled around, done an awful lot, seen a lot of things, and done a lot of things. And that brings a level of experience to everybody. Mm-hmm. But what you do with that experience is the tell. And he was able to take on the elements of the best people that he'd seen, synthesize that into the way he wanted to be. And that requires a level of intelligence, but a much higher level of emotional intelligence to be able to pick up on those little things and park your own stuff. Because in the book, I talk about the fact I was going through a divorce at the time. Well, so was he at the time. And we would share stories, and he was, on the face of it, he may not have been, but on the face of it, he was dealing with it on the whole better than me. He would have his time where he would get emotional, and I would have my time where I would get emotional. Mine seemed to outweigh his. There was no judgment involved in that at all. But he always seemed to have the right answer, and I'd like to think that occasionally I had the right answer for him as well. Because, and I've never heard the phrase before, but with your permission, I'm going to use it, that your superpowers are very close to your scars.
Often the case.
Yeah.
I have found in my personal experiences, because you do more to move away from bad than you do to move towards good. Someone will start losing weight when they get on the scales and it says 30 stone, and you go, oh my God, this is horrific. And not until that person leaves you will you go, oh, well, hopefully a lot of us will, but you go, oh, something's changed, until you nearly get sacked. And so you go, oh, I've got to change this. And then you become a champion for it until you have a child with autism. And then all of a sudden you're the goddamn subject matter expert on it. And so you should be.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Same was with me we do a lot of raising money for breast cancer awareness with the Pink Firefighters.
Yeah.
Because I knew some people close to me that had breast cancer. Would I care as much if I didn't? Probably not. I'd care. The same way that I care that Africans are starving at the moment, but I'm not rushing to get off this call, donate 50 quid because, limitations and things you can influence.
I think there needs to be, firstly, a proximity, and secondly, I think there needs to be a level of pain to take action. Often. My fiance and I, Emily, we do a little bit of property stuff, and we'll put a number on the table for someone who's selling their house. We call them motivated sellers, and often it's not the number they want to hear, and we say, right, that number will stay there though. We're not going to take that number off the table, but it's going to stay there. And we'll walk away, and they're not experiencing enough pain yet. I.e., their house hasn't been on the market. They haven't had enough people say, yeah, but I want this, I want that, I want the other. And the amount of times people end up coming back and going, that offer that's still on the table, well, it's more attractive now from a distance.
It's like the person that holds onto the Porsche when it's rotting on the drive. And they go, it's worth 20 grand, Paul. No, it's not. It's worth what someone's willing to pay for it, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mate, I've absolutely loved our conversation. I know you have a commitment to your family this evening, as do I. People won't know. It's around 5:30 in the evening when we're recording now. If people want to learn a little bit more information, we're going to put a link for Forensic Leadership for people to go and get the book. If they want to go beyond that and get a bit more information or potentially even support, whether that be at executive level or otherwise, what's the best way for people to reach out with you?
The best way at the moment, because we're redesigning websites, it seems to be a perpetual thing. Just look me up on LinkedIn, Paul Kinkaid, spellings at the bottom, 2 Ks. Just look me up on LinkedIn. I'm pretty prolific on there.
We will put a link in these notes for your LinkedIn, and we'll put a link for the book as well, so people can go and find a bit more information.
That'd be great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Brother, thank you so much for your time. I would sincerely love, and I'm not just saying this because we're still recording, I really enjoyed our conversation. Maybe in 6 months, 8 months, something like that. I'd love to circle back, selfishly, see how I've changed, because I always think of it like the whole river thing, a man never enters the same river twice because the river's changed and so's the man. Every time I have these conversations, I reflect back because I have to have the awkward reality of listening back to them at times as well and going,
it can be awkward.
Jesus Christ, Pete, stop waffling and interrupting Paul. But in 6 or 8 months' time, I'd love to reflect back on maybe some of the more impacts that you've had, brother.
Yeah, let's do that. I'd like that. I'd appreciate it.
Beautiful. All right, my man. Take care of yourself and I'll speak to you soon.
You too.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, live with intention, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.